Gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Man to Man here on the 360 Man. I'm Jesse Behringer, and today we're discussing how we save for retirement as we continue our conversation of finances. Here to join me for the conversation today is Chris Pollard. He's a certified financial planner with a master's in business administration, received his bachelor's from the United States Military Academy at West Point, and has more than 14 years experience working in the world of finance. He's been a soldier, professor, advisor, and now entrepreneur and principal owner of a personal finance firm specializing in wealth management and retirement planning. Chris, thanks for being here. Let's get into it. So, Chris, I want to get into now talking about retirement and how we should go about saving for retirement, both as an individual now in my 20s and eventually when I get married and I start saving as a couple. So, how much should the average person have to say that they have enough saved up for retirement?
Yeah. So determining how much you should have is like probably the number one question, because everybody's like, well, how much do I need to retire? How much? How much is always a number? What we really do is take a step back and say, what do you want your retired life to look like? And then you can back into it how much you actually need. So it goes back to that. What am I doing now, and how is my life going to change when I'm retired? So you might say, okay, is my house going to be paid off or not by the time I retire? Or do I have to still keep paying my mortgage for a few years?
Yeah.
Right. So there's other factors that are going to come into this. In general, what most people will do is say, hey, the amount of money that I earn minus taxes, minus what I invest is what I spend. Right. So that if you just say, what's my paycheck? I've got to pay some taxes on it. And I put money in investments and savings. Right. When you retire, you're no longer safe, right? Because you don't have income coming in anymore.
Right.
So you're going to back out of that. So let's say so by the time you retire, you're making $100,000 a year, just for easy math. All right. And then you pay 20% taxes, and then you save 10% per year. So now that gets us down to $70,000. And so that's your spending. All right. So if you're going to spend $70,000 a year, eventually you might take Social Security. You log online and you'll see the amount that you'll get at different ages. And there's very complex math and people debate on when to take it. But you say, okay, how much am I going to get from Social Security, or do you have a pension from work? So if you were in the military, you get a pension. If you're a teacher, you get a pension, firefighter, right? Those are going away. So people have to save on their own for the difference between what they need to live on and what they get paid from Social Security. Most Americans have not saved enough, and they will exclusively live on Social Security and whatever little savings they have. Most have not saved enough, so they have to work longer and probably live a little less with a different lifestyle than they'd prefer.
Yeah.
So we got to get ahead of that. If you start young, it's easier. The problem is you don't earn a lot when you're young. So it's not like, oh, save $10,000 a year. It's like, well, I literally make $10,000 a year. Therefore, you are unhelpful.
Right.
So we got to start with the end in mind, which is save 10 to 15% of what you make. So it's like tithing to yourself into investments for the future. That is not helpful if you don't have an emergency fund first. So the reason why we're circling back to some things we said earlier, because they are always true. When emergencies come up in life, if you don't have reserves for them, you will be forced to cut into your investments or to build debt. You don't want to build debt when you're about to retire, so you'd have to cash in your investments earlier than you want to. You got to give investments time, because time is what makes investments grow more than anything else, more than selecting the right thing. If you just generally select diversified stuff, this is a very complicated topic, but if you select diversified stuff and let it sit for long periods of time, you make money and you don't have to mess with it very much. So, but you can't give it time if you have an emergency come up. So establish an emergency fund, don't overextend yourself, and then you can save 10 to 15% of your paycheck consistently every single year for your entire working career. And then you will generally be in the vicinity of what's needed. So let's say right now, when you retire, you want to have $7,000 a month to spend. Let's say $3,000 comes from Social Security for you and your spouse, from Social Security. So you have a $4,000 difference, right? That $4,000 needs to come from investments. So what you do is take that $4,000 number and multiply it by 300. And that's the mathematical equivalent of what you need in investments to support that at a 4% rate, which is generally considered, as a rule of thumb, like a safe amount to pull out of your investments each year if it's earning a modest amount.
Okay. So backtrack that back again for me.
Yeah.
So evaluating how much do I want to be spending when I'm retired, like,
Yes.
and then backtracking from there and taking, okay, 15. And then if I want more, like, it's really how, comfortable you want to be during retirement.
Yeah. Or retire early, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So then when you know that of like, how much do I want saved for retirement so I can live like this when I'm retired? Now you can start to know your checkpoints
Yes.
for what you need to have saved up.
Yep. Your trajectory. And I have, in the financial planning world, we have software to help model it because we know that clients go through different phases, and sometimes they earn less, sometimes they earn more, sometimes they're unemployed. And you can model out what is a consistent number. And then if the client gets ahead or behind both, when can you cut back, right? If you're ahead, or when do you need to try to catch up, and when could you make that feasible for somebody? Because we can do unhelpful planning, which is save $2 million or save $1 million, save 15%. And they're like, well, I can't pay my bills now.
Yeah.
It's a different problem. So you have to identify what are we really trying to solve for here, and how much is that going to change, right? And that's why financial modeling is like, it has a very short shelf life because it expires. Everything changes so fast that when you use general rules of thumb, it gets you in the vicinity of right. And then you have to evaluate your own personal situation to get that. So if you can't start at the 15% level, you start at the 2% level or the 1%. Get anything into retirement that you can. Once you have an emergency fund and something like that saved, you got to kind of focus on emergencies first, because otherwise you will just end up cashing in your investments constantly whenever anything, a pipe bursts in your house and you're like, oh man, and then there goes the retirement fund.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So then that helps a lot, because I'm hearing you say, right, you keep saying emergency fund, because if life crisis happens, God forbid your house burns down, your car is totaled, whatever it may be, you lose your job, you need to have these safety nets built in place so that you're not taking away from your retirement when crisis happens.
Yes. And you have to, when I talk about that backwards budget where you're like, how should we spending our money, right? When you say, where do we want our money to go? And you say, okay, we're going to spend X amount on rent or a mortgage, this much on a car, this much on gas, this is food. You got to add retirement into that, savings. And also refilling your emergency fund, because emergencies will occasionally come up. So you got to not build such a tight budget that whenever anything goes wrong, it blows your budget out.
Right.
And that's where an emergency fund helps, tide you over. It can be very hard to build an emergency fund, because if you start behind with student loans and credit card and a car loan, you can see how this gets overwhelming quickly.
Yeah.
That's why don't overcommit yourself early is how you're going to build in the capacity to save. Koi fish and koi ponds, those little goldfish things.
Yeah.
They start out small. If you put them in a small tank, they stay small. If you put them in a big pool, they grow to kind of fit their environment. And that's what happens with people's budgets is they're a small fish. They first start out with their first job and they learn to survive in that little fish tank. Yeah. And then they kind of get a raise, and then they get in a bigger tank and they grow and just take over the space. Rather than saying, oh, maybe if I stayed a modest size and then invest the raise, or maybe we break our raises into parts where we say a third will go to, I want to give more to the church, right? And I'm going to give a third to that, and a third will go to paying down debt, and a third more goes to investing, right? And kind of breaking things up into basic rules for yourself to follow as you see a pivot point, right? So a pivot point is I get a raise, I get a promotion, like something. When there's a change, you need to, around your finances, you need to reevaluate the rules you set for yourself to make it saving a habit,
right?
And on autopilot. Otherwise, it's like working out. Nobody ends up doing it, right? Except for people that are like really into it, but everybody else is like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to work out, but I never do it.
Right.
Rather than saying, oh, I learned, I walk to work every day, and therefore it's built into it, or something like that. Building it into it. Building into your life so that it's consistent and on autopilot. So automatic transfers into investment accounts, automatic savings from your checking, automatic contributions from your paycheck into your 401k. These are the things that will make you achieve success kind of on autopilot, but you got to have the capacity to get there when you build your budget. If retirement's the last thing on the list, it'll get the smallest amount, right? So it's got to kind of come out the top and say, you need a place to live and some stuff to eat. And then after that, retirement, it's got to be high on the priority list, because otherwise you're going to have to play catch up later at much higher savings rates, like 25%, or right when your kid wants to get married, and then you're like, oh, I want to pay for the wedding, but we're trying to save for retirement. and then you just never get there.
Yeah.
It can be really challenging.
Okay, so when it comes to retirement, what are tangibly my best options as like maybe a 20-year-old student or working in the workforce? What are my best options to get ahead on the ball of saving for retirement?
Yeah. So first thing you want to do is, if you have a 401k at work and you get they match, get whatever they match. So what a matching is you put in money and they give you the same exact amount or some percentage of what you put in. So if you put in 1%, they give you 1%. If you put in 2, they give 2. And usually they cap it at a certain limit. So the most common is that they match up to 3%, let's say. So you take your paycheck, you go into your payroll system and you say, put in 3% to the 401k. You put in 3, your employer puts in 3, and now you have 6% there. Your money is instantly doubled. Usually the stock market takes 6 to 10 years to double your money. Depends on what rates of return are.
Wow.
So you're getting instant doubling of your money because you get a match. This is a very powerful way to accumulate money consistently over time because your employer matches you. If you just don't do it or you opt out, you'll miss out on that opportunity to get free doubling of your money.
Right.
So number one, if you're offered a retirement plan, you got to use it. Unless you're so far in debt that you're in a very bad financial place, you got to get the match because it's free money.
Right. And that's not a situation where they're handling it all for you. Like, my job does my taxes for me. They W-2 me at the end of the year. Like, it's not something that I just put off to the side. There is actionable steps that I need to do participating in saving for that, even if it is something like a 401k.
Yep. And the 401k, you got to, when you first get your job, when you're signing up in the HR portals, when they say, oh, what's your direct deposit number? And, do you have a spouse? And here's medical benefits. Pick your plan.
Yeah.
The next thing on the list is going to be, we have a 401k. Do you want to participate? And then you
say yes.
You say yes.
Yeah.
And then you make it automatic. And whenever you get raises, you see what you can do to bump it up. And that is how you get to, because most people they're like, oh, I can't afford it now. I can't afford it now. Well, you can never afford it if you don't force yourself to afford it. Then we'll start to look at Roth IRAs. So Roth IRAs, you can open them at investment companies. You want to keep the fees very low. Don't get locked into some really complicated things. What you want to do is keep it simple. And you open a Roth IRA account at one of these places, and you can put in a certain amount of money based on how much you've earned and your age.
And what is explain to me the Roth IRA? Like, what is that an investment that I'm putting in? Like, what is a Roth IRA?
So a Roth IRA is a way that the IRS looks at money, really. So it's more like a bucket, and you write on the bucket Roth IRA, and it says tax-free in the future.
Yeah.
So you put money into that bucket and you invest it in stuff. So the bucket really holds things for you.
Sure.
You can switch out what's in there. You could switch out the types of investments. You can buy stocks, bonds, Bitcoin, all kinds of stuff. And you can switch them out. As long as you don't take the money out of the bucket, you're good. It's still Roth money.
Okay.
And then there's exceptions, but usually you don't touch that money until you're 59 and a half. So call it 60.
Yeah.
Right? No matter how big that money grows, you will never pay tax on how big it grows. Right. So if you put money into it and it grows to be $1 million, you will pay zero income tax on that growth.
That sounds good.
Yes. The 401k depends on how you set it up. There's Roth 401ks too, but you can set up a 401k. And if you have I have clients that have, $3-4 million from 401ks. Whenever they pull $1 out, it counts as income because they got a tax deduction when they put the money in. So that means they paid less tax back when they were 30 or 20.
Yeah.
But now they're retired and they're forced to pull a certain amount out per year, and they have to pay tax on it after it's grown to some very large number. So if you have the opportunity, and we have to look at tax brackets too, that's more complicated than we need to talk through today. But for most people, the average American, using Roth IRAs is the way to get tax-free wealth. And just set aside money for retirement and do it consistently, add into it every year. But you got to get the match first, because the match is instant doubling. It's free money, right? So if you have the match, do that first, then transition to your Roth IRA, and then fully fund that for you and your spouse if you can. And then we start, looking at other options.
Right. And those two options, right? I think Roth IRA, you can sign up to do just separately, like
not tied to work.
But a 401k is something that is really like someone's matching it for you. So it's going to be at a job kind of context.
Yes. Now you can set up a 401k for yourself if you're self-employed. There are some costs with that, so you got to make sure it's worth it, and that you're going to put in enough to support the costs that are incurred and the accounting and all that. and the administration of it, but you can actually set up a 401k for yourself as a self-employed person and save tons of money, like very, very large amounts of money into it.
So 401k, Roth IRA, all those options. What if I just want to save? Like if I just want to put away money in a bank account to make it super simple, what's the best way to do that while still being effective and lucrative in the amount that I'm saving?
Yeah. So I would say, as the structure we talked about before, you have your fixed spending account, your flexible spending account, and then your emergency fund or a savings account, right? Mm-hmm. That can also be for, I need to buy a car soon, I'll need a down payment, or I need a down payment on a house, or I'm going to move and it's going to cost me $5,000 to drive across the country and then put a down payment on my next place, right? Yeah. I need to save for that. So you're going to put that in a savings account generally at a bank. You can do CDs and things like that. That locks up your money. So CD is a certificate of deposit. They pay you higher interest, but you're not allowed to touch the money. So it locks it up for a set period of time, but they'll pay you significantly more than if it's in a checking account. The way I look at it is if you need the money in a short period of time, like next year, next month, it needs to be in a checking savings account or a CD that is the CD needs to mature by the time you need it. Sometimes you can break them, but there are little penalties to that. If you aren't going to touch money for like 10 years, it needs to be invested because then you got to grow it. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there and inflation will eat away at it.
So you can save and put it in a savings account, but it's not going to grow much recognizably at all compared to when you start investing it.
Right. If you invest correctly and give it enough time. So that is probably the number one mistake that people make when they invest is their expectation for how fast it'll grow is mismatched from reality. There's no guarantee that money will grow in investing. Sometimes you live in a decade where things are just not good, right? The stock market crashes a couple times, whatever. It just happened to be what happened during that period for you. But in general, over very long periods of time, if you give stocks enough time, they make more than other types of publicly traded investments. So we say if you're not going to touch the money for 7 to 10 years, you can put it in stocks. If it's less than that, you might be able to drop down to like bonds. And then sooner than that, you want CDs, or checking savings accounts that are very safe.
Right. And this is a lot of what you do in your business, right? Chris, is helping people plan financially for their future, for retirement, and saying, hey, I get a lot of this stuff is confusing. Let me help you do this so that I can plan for you and you can just worry about like the right here and now.
Yeah, the right here and now. And then also like we work collaboratively. So when I'll often do check-ins with clients and ask them how their life's going, because when a client's getting discontented with their life, they're going to make a change and that's going to impact their finances. Or when their finances aren't going well, they can't do what they want to do in life. So the interplay between life and money is probably one of the most rewarding parts of what I do, but it's also the trickiest because then you say, oh, how are things going at work? And then you just hear about things aren't going well and you're hearing a job change. And then you're saying, okay, we need to make sure emergency fund is here so that they can make that job transition to a job that'll make that where there's a more positive work environment, or they can make the career switch, right? And then, oh, by the way, they're going to have their old 401k. They need to move that into their new 401k, or so it's kind of anticipating based on the client's life and how it's going, like how you need to position finances and change that.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we have to do things like, oh, we had this money set aside because we were going to invest it for 10 years, but you decided, hey, we want to buy a house, or hey, it's college time and the college savings didn't grow as much, so we got to pull from this other account. And then you have a change in what we call a change in an investment objective, which is like, oops, we were thinking one way, now we're thinking another way, we have to change the plan. So a lot of my job is being flexible with how life changes, and then making sure when people position money that it was positioned optimally to kind of grow it as best we can, but also not end up backed into a corner where we're like, oh, I needed that money for college, but the market is down 30% right now. And now I can't pay this college tuition for this quarter, or this semester, right? That's bad planning. That's like, don't put your money in the market if you need it soon. Right. So there's a lot of thought that goes into, should this dollar be positioned at risk and how much risk?
Gotcha.
Or should it be in something safe?
So basically, if people watching, if they don't know hey, I just am completely lost. Like Roth IRA, 401k, even just saving, like, I don't really know what to do. Is that a sign that like, hey, that's probably a good time to go and look at getting a financial advisor, a financial planner, even if it's just a one-time consultation to be like, hey, let me get you on the right course?
Yes. Yeah. So there's help out there. There's professionals that can do it. You have to be careful which professionals you use, because some are kind of very sales driven and they'll try to sell you something.
Yeah.
And so you have to be a little careful with that. But I wouldn't let that be a barrier to using a certified financial planner. And, I have networks of people that I know that deal with very specific client types. Like some are specialized in helping people pay down student loans and figuring out all of that. So whenever I have somebody come to me that says, hey, I'm just starting out, I'm new in my career, I have a lot of student loans, I say, boom, I need to refer them to so-and-so, and then I'll provide the introduction, and that advisor can help them, because there are advisors that specialize in a lot of different types of clients.
Yeah.
And that way I can refer, but you got to make the initial step. So when people are looking for advisors, a couple places they can look is napfa.org, NAPFA. And that's the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors. They're fee-only advisors, so they're not going to try to sell you a product. They work for a fee, period.
Yeah.
That's how I work.
Are you a part of that group?
Yeah, I'm part of that group. I'm also part of the XY Planning Network, which we work with clients of kind of all sizes. We don't necessarily have account minimums like, oh, you don't have investments to manage, I can't work with you. We may have like minimum fees that we charge a client, but it's not going to be necessarily dependent. I have some clients I don't manage any of their investments because it's all in a business, and then I just advise them and they pay a fee for that. There's hourly planners that can help out. So there's a lot of ways to get help from good people.
Sure.
XY Planning Network, like I said, NAPFA, and Alliance of Comprehensive Planners. Those are like the top three that I would look at. Alliance of Comprehensive Planners. We do a lot of like tax work blended in with our financial advice. So when you have a lot of concerns about taxes, the ACP is a really good group to reach out to as well.
And is there a type of financial niche that a certified financial planner works in, specifically dealing with young adults? Like, is there
some do. It's difficult, right? Because you guys have budget constraints, right? When I first started, it's like I have no money. Like I can't pay somebody to help me. So I would maybe set aside some money as one of your goals, like build up your emergency fund and then build up a little bit of a fund to say, I need to sit down with the planner and get pointed in the right direction.
Yes.
There are also financial coaches are really good to start. They're going to be helping. They're not going to advise as much on investing. They're more about how to do budgeting and get that initial stuff started. That's what financial coaches do.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So a financial coach is something that you're looking at of just, hey, kind of shape me in the right direction here and get me going. And then later on, I can come back to an actual certified financial planner to get me going on the retirement stage.
And there are some financial planners that start with anybody, and they'll just say, hey, I'm more than happy to. So you don't know until you ask, but usually it's pretty clear on the website. Like, hey, I work, like on my website, I work with people that are going to retire within 5 years usually, or they own a business. That's like 95% of my clients are those people. And if you don't fit in those categories, I know people who I'm like, oh, this person just needs to sit down with a planner for an hour. I'm going to refer him up to Dave Sturman. He's up in New Paltz, right? So there's different people.
So just because you don't specialize in that doesn't mean you shouldn't like still reach out to that financial planner and say, hey, this is my situation. I don't know if you're the person that I can talk to about this, but could you help me find somebody that can? Yes.
And XY Planning Network in particular has filters where you can say, I am a lawyer that's looking for a financial advisor to help me with retirement, and it'll filter out advisors that say they specialize in that. And you could say, I deal with student loans, and there's advisors, or like college funding. There are advisors that just specialize in that, and you'll be able to find them by location, whether they work remotely. There's screening where you can do it by like what is my life stage, and it'll pop up and try to narrow it down to some choices for you.
Okay, well that's extremely helpful to know. Hey, these are your options, right? You can do a 401k, looking at that if there's a job you're going to be in a field where certain jobs will provide that. Roth IRA whether you're in a job or working for yourself. And then if not, and you just completely lost, look for a financial planner, reach out to somebody that does coaching financially, and then help someone get you in the right direction there so that you can evaluate what you do need to do with your finances and planning for retirement and and handling your finances.
And I'd say if you feel lost, ask for directions, right? Men don't like to ask for directions, but that's when you'll be like, do I really know what I'm doing? If you ever have a doubt, you don't, and ask for help. Because if it's not your career field, like if I'm doing electrical work at my house, and
call an electrician.
Call an electrician if you have a doubt about what you're doing, and maybe even if you don't, because sometimes you don't know what you're doing,
right?
And you don't want to burn down your house. The problem with finances is it's a problem you rarely see the initial. Sometimes you see the initial problem right away, but usually it's accumulation of multiple decisions over a long period of time that leads to oh man, I have too much debt and I can't handle it anymore,
right.
Or we have no debt, but we also have no savings. Right. These kinds of things are long-term problems. And if you start, the earlier you start and the more you start to integrate, hey, I need to take ownership of my own finances. This is part of living in the way our society is structured. You gotta pay attention to finances, or it'll come back to bite you. Because even if you feel comfortable throughout your life, if you haven't really sat down and thought about it, something's going to come up later, and it's often a little too late to address it. So earlier is better. And then a planner will be able to tell you like, hey, we'll work together. I have some planner friends, they'll work with somebody for a couple of hours and then say, come back and see me when you hit this goal. Right. And then they'll be able to, help you out when you need it. Because sometimes folks don't need it. They just need to consistently do the right thing. Like put money in the 401k all the time. Don't build up too much debt. Keep your emergency fund going. Keep doing that consistently. You're gonna get headed in the right direction, and then you can work with an advisor to tweak it. So,
well, Chris, thank you so much for being here, having this discussion today. We covered a lot. I mean, there's so much more we could have went through, but for a lot of people watching, I'm sure there's a lot more questions they have, and maybe they're even ready to take that next step and to say, hey, I want to sit down and have a discussion about my finances. And Chris, as a part of your business, Greater Path Financial Planning, where could people go if they're interested in having a discussion like that with you to have, those conversations?
Yeah. So you can check out my website, greatpathfp.com. That's GREATPATH. F is in financial, P is in planning. Yeah. Greatpathfp.com. You can look me up on LinkedIn and we can connect. And, if I can't help you, I have colleagues that can always point somebody in the right direction. So
excellent. Love it. We'll link that in the description below. And once again, Chris, appreciate you taking the time and coming to share your insight today. Very, very helpful.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks.